the data that I think everybody's been waiting for. We've kind of, pinned at it a couple of times this week, but now we're going to talk about 2022 and the outlook for 2023 because the data is officially in.
Let's go.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
There we go, boys. How are y'all recovering from yesterday?
Oh, great. I didn't go to sleep until 1 o'clock last night.
He rewatched it. He rewatched the 7 hours after it was done.
No.
I'm exhausted, but you know what? This is what we do for everybody, just to kind of take in all the new things that are happening for next year and really focus on personal development. So adrenaline will get you through. How are you doing, Dan? Because I know
really
it was a rough day for you.
That's the question.
It was a really rough day. I took 2 naps during the day. Like at lunchtime, I went right to bed. And then it was just, anyways, long story short, it was like 27 units of morphine I had to take in order to get through the day because I'm in pain all the time. So it's, but it was just to keep my voice. And then I went to bed after, fell asleep I think I jumped off at like 4:30 when India came on. I jumped off because I was like, my voice was toast. I slept until 6:30 or 7 o'clock, woke up, and then I was back in bed sleeping by 10.
I tried the same. I took a nap right after, and then I was in bed like wide awake. And then my wife was like, okay, stop moving around, watch some TV or something. So I watched like 4 episodes of The Office, and then I knocked out eventually. So whenever in doubt, watch The Office. And even for Dean, it was a long day too, because like he did a show in the morning, which was amazing with Ken and everything like that. And then he came and hung out with us. So I'm just so grateful for that and grateful for today's episode.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And sorry, Dean, we didn't get a full half hour in with you yesterday. I know we were diving into some pretty cool stuff.
That was fascinating.
We got a full hour
listening.
today.
Yeah. Morning, Lisa.
So the
Lisa?
big question, brother. The data's in for 2022. What's the overall, like, is it as bad as everyone is claiming? Well, certain places are claiming it is, or what's the status here?
On the import side? It's fascinating. Remember how we talked about the overall trend of imports being above 2 million TEU per month for a long period of time.
Yeah.
And I'll just repeat the quote from Jeff Lynch at Georgia Ports. He said, whenever our supply chain gets over 2 million TEU per month, the supply chain gets into trouble. So we passed 2 million containers, 20-foot equivalents coming in August of 2020. Depending on which data set you look at, we're going back through the 2 million mark in November for the first time since August 2020. And when you look at the charts, it's just extraordinary. You can sort of visually see this. We're up to 2.6 million. I think the peak was in May this year. The peak imports was May this year. So if you think about all of the retail inventories that have bloated all of our warehouses, that peak really came into the country on the retail import side back in the middle of the year. That's why we're seeing such a non-existent peak season. So it's interesting that you hear rumblings of the supply chain coming back to normal. Things are easing. Things are getting better. Demand is sort of cooling off a little bit. And it's interesting as we cross back under the 2 million mark. I don't think it's a coincidence that that's happening. It's given.
Did you want me to show one of these charts, Dean?
Yeah, the long-term one, if you've got it, that shows the other one that I sent you with the line chart that shows the longer term.
Probably the different one. So then just
the next one.
Dan loves charts, by the way. He's a chart master.
Yeah.
The chart master.
Yeah.
Chart master 9000, I call myself.
Hey, don't push it, man. Come on, you only have about 7. You only have to 7.
Yes. So if you can get the line chart up, it shows you really what we're talking about here. Even in 2019,
I could do it.
Yeah,
I have to
there
do
we
it
go.
for you, my friend.
There we go.
So you can see, July, August, we bump above 2 million TEU, and then of course we have this whole supply chain crisis that's starting to ease. Volumes started to fall away in August. I think volumes are down about 26, maybe 27% since August this year. So the volumes are falling right off. And remember, volumes do decline in December anyway, but not at the rate that they're declining this November. When you look at previous years, it's nowhere near that. As you can see, back in 2019, we had a bit of a peak season in April, which again is normal, and then we had a peak season, more of a peak season in June, July. Jeff, was it, guys? Was this right? Was January 20 the Trump administration 10% tariff on imports?
I think so. I think it was.
If that was the case, 2019 was because of the pull forward of inventory to avoid the 2020 tax on goods made in China.
Yes.
I think that was the timing.
Yes.
Right. So again, the global port tracker forecast is that the green dotted line on the right has us dropping down a little bit in December. January's a little bit up, and then we see this precipitous drop off as we always do in February, March. If you look at 2020, that was the last time we saw the Chinese New Year quiet season, where factories shut down for 3 weeks.
COVID, though, wasn't it? For the shutdown.
Yeah, but if you look at March,
2020.
Yeah, if you look at March 11. Yes. Yeah, March 11 was when the WHO declared a global pandemic, but the volumes are already coming down during Chinese New Year in 2020 as they would normally do.
So here's the story. Here's the story the way that I see it. All right. Because of the pandemic and the disruptions that all the shippers saw, they did not want to wait for the normal peak season. So they started ordering fast, taking into consideration the delays at the ports and how long it took their products to get to their facilities for distribution. So they got ahead of the curve and they started ordering a lot. I mean, you can just see this. It's just amazing how fast. And of course, you have all these warehouses that were at full maximum at 99.2%, or might be even higher than that when it was really bad. And now you have all this excess inventory that is just sitting there that they need to push out in order to make space for new products coming in. I mean, it's evident here. You can see that. It's plain as day. Yep.
The other thing that's and you can show some of the other charts if you like, Dan, the overall one. I looked at the top 8 ports. Maybe the other one if you could. The top 8 ports is kind of interesting. I didn't do the top 10 because the volumes have dropped so much in Vancouver. It's like minus 110%. It's up 110% year over year. It would have just blown my chart out of the map. So the top 8 ports here on this particular chart represent 73% of the containers imported in November. So the bulk of the industry, the bulk of the ports. So when you look at them, though, that we've talked a lot about Houston. It was the only port to show a year-over-year increase, albeit volumes are decreasing. And if you look at Long Beach, Los Angeles, year-over-year volumes are down. So are month-over-month volumes. Again, no surprise to anybody. But I think we've talked a lot about this shift towards the East Coast, and it's certainly, I think Houston was the one that appears to have benefited the most. Yep. And as we talked about on our show yesterday, Texas has been a real star for flatbed carriers. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about break bulk tonnage. If you think about break bulk tonnage, which is sort of non-containerized freight that a lot of flatbeds will pick up, flatbed rates in Texas have been really good. In last week, we had the second highest December rate in Texas as an average in 7 years. And it's no mistake that correlates with a lot of the volumes we saw come into Houston. Spot rates in Houston are up. One of the busiest lanes we've seen in the spot market is Houston to Fort Worth, and Jeff will know why, because of all the warehouses. Oh, yeah. Rates are still a bit lower than this time last year, but they did peak. So again, break bulk tonnage in Houston peaked. If you look at that previous chart, peaked in May this year, and freight rates for Houston to Fort Worth for $3.95 a mile. But volumes have dropped 25% since then. and spot rates have come back down also. So the reason I mention that is you can always see a very good correlation between import volumes in certain ports and demand for truckload carriers on certain lanes. And that's why whenever we talk about averages, there's no one home at the average. Right? You know, when I say the average rate is $2.05 a mile, there's such a variance in that. There are some lanes that are a lot more than that. Some are lower, depending on the head haul, back haul component. So Dan, the next one is really the coastal shift, and again, here is Houston, Mobile, Tampa's also in that Gulf data, although bulk of it's Houston. Up 2% year over year, whereas the east and west coast are definitely slowing down. The west coast more so. So you're seeing volumes fall off. Jason Miller had a great post this week, and he said one of the big things that's impacting falling imports is, of course, furniture, which is tied to, well, furniture and electrical appliances, which are tied to the building industry, which is, of course, slowed down. I don't know if you recall, at the peak of the pandemic, furniture was about 15% of total TEU imports. And it was, at that point, it was triple the nearest next commodity.
Yeah.
I don't have the exact data of what furniture represents now, but whenever you listen to Gene Soroka talk at the Port of Los Angeles, he will always say furniture is by far our biggest import commodity on the container side. So that's a big part of, you know, all of that eventually gets hauled by dry vans and, you know, and trucks that haul all of those sorts of things over the country. So retail imports aren't the biggest part of the freight task, but certainly they've had a big impact on freight markets. And we're still seeing the ripple effects in markets like Los Angeles, where rates went up for the second week in a row on the spot market because of the threat of the rail strike and people shifting volumes over to the truckload market on that Los Angeles to Chicago lane in particular. So that's sort of the summary. November imports are in. Again, the caveat is these are kind of preliminary numbers as the Customs and Border Patrol push out all the bills of lading to all of the different vendors that buy their data. There's a lot of inconsistencies in how people code the harmonized codes. So there's that you'll always see, you know, Descartes had it at 1.950 million TEU. There's about 100,000 TEU difference with the peers data I'm looking at right now. But as time goes on and the things get cleaned up in the databases, they start to narrow down a bit. So just remember, if you're seeing different reports in the market of some volumes under 2 million, some over, it doesn't really matter too much whether it's a few thousand here or there. But the point is that we're heading back around the 2 million mark. And anecdotally, that's a good sign that there's more fluidity coming back into supply chains as people get a bit of a breather to catch up.
Now, Dean, do you think moving forward with the big, a lot of companies now switching to India for a lot of their product over China, do you think we're going to start seeing that dip where we see it at Chinese New Year every year? Or do you think things are going to start shifting dramatically on that front?
Gosh, I talked about it yesterday. This is a great question, Dan, because nearshoring is becoming a real thing in truckload. I think we said on the show 2 weeks ago, was it 87% of exports from Mexico goes across the border by truck?
Yeah.
Right. We looked at our truckload volumes on the southern border markets. They've been growing at a rate of 25% year over year for the last 4 years. So think about Laredo, El Paso, McAllen, Nogales, Mexicali. We are seeing more and more truckload volume come across from Mexico, and I think there's been a big push for people to nearshore to Mexico. So yes, I think volumes are going to continue to decline out of northern Asia, which includes China. I think southern Asia, Southeast Asia will see volumes increase as they've done, but we'll see a different shift because I think the ocean carriers have said it's more economical to run west to the east coast than run east to the west coast of the US. If that makes sense. The Suez Canal is a better option to the east coast than it is across the Trans-Pacific trade lane and up through the Panama Canal,
which they call the all-water option.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I think I wrote a piece yesterday about, and I'll just give you a second to pull this up, but it was a really interesting data point I thought around the market in Charleston. I don't know if you remember last year we talked about Charleston had put in a new they put in a new dock. I think it was about 1,000 foot. It was called the Leatherman Terminal, and it was in March of 2021 they opened this terminal. It was 1,400 feet. Well, they just announced a little while ago that they were increasing the depth of the harbour to 52 feet. So 52 feet's a big. They've been dredging the harbour all this year. They've spent a lot of money. Charleston's not a big truckload market by any stretch of the imagination, but when you dredge your harbour to 52 feet, you allow the Ever Given type ships to come in and dump thousands and thousands of containers. Suddenly, yeah. So we went back and looked at all of our load posts on that particular market. I'm just trying to pull this up here. I'll have to find it, but they have grown. So we've seen volumes increase 23% year over year in Savannah, up 121% in Brunswick. So we're seeing, as a result of that, we are seeing spot market volume grow. And this is, again, if you've been following our show here, that's something we've been saying for the best part of a year, Dan, where as the coastal shift continues, you'll see volumes pop up in markets you would not normally have thought to position your assets. And of course, now I read with much interest the Costco story this week where they've taken a big charge because I guess they're going to go off lease with all of those ships because those ships were coming to smaller ports.
Yep.
Over during the pandemic, which was driving a lot of truckload volume in places, south of Boston, where you can barely swing a cat, but you can get like an 8,000 TEU in to unload a bunch of containers. And that's why I was seeing a lot of reefer volume in particular come into really obscure places that you wouldn't have thought to run truckload volume out of. But of course, they're not standard origin destination pairings in the contract market. They'll go to the broker market for spot market moves. So all of that seems to be easing away, but the one thing that's sticking is some of this volume will stick on the East Coast because of the infrastructure they've been able to build.
Yes, sir.
Crazy to think about. And I was reading the article yesterday when you guys had the gentleman from Bloomberg Intelligence, and he was talking about, hey, what is his 2023 outlook's looking like, and he's saying that big carriers are going to be down 14% across the board as the GDP kind of goes down and the R word starts talking a little bit more. So can you talk a little bit more about like what that kind of looks like for the market for like a broker? Like if these big guys are taking a 14% dive, just imagine kind of like the smaller or mid-sized team as well.
Yeah, so I guess, Ryan, they're coming off what's going to look like 4 quarters of pretty stellar profits and profit margins and income levels. I think this quarter they'll take a little bit of a beating for sure. So I think what that means is they've got a pretty good runway heading into the quiet season next year. They're going to try and get a lot more trucks out of factories, increase their trade cycles, jettison some of those older aged equipments onto the market. They see they've got a very positive outlook to demand in the second half of this year when all of these trucks and trailers will come out of the factories. They've got a 9-month backlog right now. So I think the contract carriers are pretty well positioned based on some of the rate negotiations we've been seeing. Rates are down. There's no question rates are down, but nowhere near 2019 levels, which I think to answer your question, I think as accurate as I can, rates are going to come down. Contract rates are decreasing, but they're not going to decrease as what you would normally expect them to decrease for the simple reason that it's costing them, I'm going to say 25 cents a mile more to run a truck this year than it did this time last year. So there's the new floor price in where rates can drop to.
Where did that floor price come from? 25 cents a mile.
So we've had 3 years of pretty steep driver pay increases to attract drivers during the pandemic. We've had diesel go up substantially. We've had 6 months of plus $5 a gallon. So diesel is the biggest reason why operating costs have increased in the last since February when Russia invaded the Ukraine. So it's mostly diesel, Dan, mostly diesel. The EIA forecast has diesel down closer to $4 by the middle of next year. It's at $4.75 national average this week. So it's down 21 cents in the last week. That's pulled my operating costs down from that truck that we talk about all the time, that long haul over the road truck, owner operated truck, to $1.98 per mile. It wasn't so long ago, it was $2.14. So it's down to $1.98 now. A big part of that is fuel dropping. That's the biggest component because I can't claw back my driver wages increases. I'm still finding it hard to find mechanics to work on my truck. I'm still paying high prices for tires. So there's, even though things are cooling, it's a bit like retail prices for diesel are coming down at a much slower rate than wholesale prices. So, retail prices are taking a while.
And they're coming down a lot slower than they went up. That's for sure.
So, yeah, that's why it costs more. So I think this time around I heard from contract carriers that they were adamant that they can't drop their rates too much. I mean, they've clearly been dropping their contract rates in the order of 12 to 15% compared to previous contracts when we look at our contract network. But they can't drop them too far. Otherwise, you get down to a situation where it's not sustainable. And that's why I think they've had to hold their ground. That's why shippers have said...
Well, you would think even at 12, 15%, if they drop 12, 15%, fuel's up higher, they can't claw back driver wages. That's a big hit.
Well, that's why there's a new floor price. Yeah, that's why there's a new floor price and what it costs to run equipment. And, Damon's got a great point. Wages are up, diesel's up, trucks and trailers have gone up, real estate, employee wages, everything has gone up. So, yeah, I mean, it's a great point. It just costs a lot more to operate a truck. And I've seen some pretty aggressive discussions between contract carriers and shippers. The thing that, and again, this is sort of not representative of every single shipper discussion, but when we look at our network, shippers were saying, yeah, we understand. We remember what happened last year where we couldn't find trucks and how much it hurt our budgets. Because as you all know, even though the spot market is a smaller percentage of your total freight volume, it can burn your budget in a heartbeat if you get it wrong because of the rates. And so shippers are looking to manage the downside risk of too much spot volume. They're looking to control the spot market more with strategic buys. But what they were telling us is they were sticking with their contract carriers, giving them more volume on key lanes, which is what a large carrier wants, is better lane density in exchange for lower rates. So big shift this year in how shippers, they were certainly remembering last year's tight market. And I think just watching some of the negotiations as I sat in the room with shippers and carriers during the bid season, there was a little bit of friction because shippers were saying, we've been hammered for 6 quarters, and carriers are saying, hey, our costs have gone through the roof. It's hard to find drivers, hard to keep drivers. And as Daman says, everything has gone up in our business. And that's a reality. Shippers tended to say, yeah, I get that, because they're paying for a lot of those costs at the supermarket also, whether it be their own car or buying food or, building houses and renovating.
Yeah, and then they also have a floor price that they operate on as well.
Yeah.
And, we talked about our friend Greg. When he was at a certain company, he went from 0 to 1.3 million square feet warehouse space.
Yeah.
That he didn't allot for in any budget. And, the shippers or manufacturers or shippers all have that kind of thing to pay for as well. It'd be interesting because I look at it and I say a 12 to 15% reduction in rates. That to me would say, okay, explain to me how you're going to reduce that.
Right.
If I was a shipper and I was looking for that for my carrier, I would want to know how, because I wouldn't want them to sacrifice safety. I wouldn't want, there's certain things I wouldn't want them to sacrifice, because that's a pretty big drop. Like you got to think if you're, $2,700 to $5,000 on a lane, 15% is a lot of money.
Yeah. So I think the best way we can sort of categorize it, and we've done a bunch of interviews this week, and Ken produced our long-term forecasts last week on our show where we sort of predicted where rates would go. We definitely see, the first thing is we're seeing more seasonality come back into the market. I think that's a key point. I think 2023 will be a more normal year in many respects. We forecast, spot rates. Remember, spot rates are about 10% of the volume right now. We think they'll bottom out in Q1. With the entire market starting to enter its next cycle by the end of Q2 this year. Next year. There's going to be a lot of push and pull. Our experts, Professor Chris Kaplis on our shipper side, his feeling is that rather than, a freight recession, he thinks the decline in the market will be more of a correction as opposed to a recession, a freight recession. So we're certainly looking for that. He thinks that contract rates, we see spot rates bottoming out into Q1. He thinks that in the second half of the year, truckload market contract rates will settle back to their normal rate of increase, which will be around inflation. So we're in that downward trend right now where spot rates are decreasing, over the continuum of time. Although we will see rates go up between now and Christmas, as they always do, and then they'll fall away. Contract rates, though, when you look at them, there's a little bit more stickiness. They are slowly coming down. New rates entering routing guides are in that 1% to 2% down. So total rates in routing guides are down, 1% to 2%. So the sort of the temperature in the market is gradually decreasing, which shippers are very happy about. So that's sort of how we see the market panning out next year. I think, Ryan, you asked that question earlier on.
Something. I got a question for you. I think a key indicator on what you're stating right now would be, what is the current capacity of the warehouses as it stands right now? Because if they're at full capacity still, from the onslaught and influx of all the containers that came in earlier than expected, where are they now? And that would pretty much tell you, the beginning of the year into the second quarter, if it's going to remain the same, if it's going to increase. I would say, because they were at like 92.9, 92.3% at full capacity. Right. So if they were in the 70s, that would tell you something, right? I mean, I think that would be a huge.
Well, also, you got to look at what's in it, right? If you brought stuff in September and it just sat there because people stopped buying, that's probably going to be like fall stuff. Now that's next year before that goes out.
So but now, Dan, take into consideration the consumer buying trends that happen. We look at Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all-time high at $25.7 billion in sales. So that tells you something right there, that a lot of that inventory hopefully depleted a lot because it was an all new high. So I'm really curious as to where they are right now, because we're getting close. We're 11 days away from Christmas. If people are going to start buying, they're going to buy like right now. And probably take that next day delivery, if you know what I mean. But
Ryan and I will be buying in 9 days.
In 9 days, I would think. But no, to that point, because I don't know if you guys read this article though, but Lululemon, they said like they're one of the biggest workout companies out there, retail. They're at capacity with their stock, but they're not going to discount their product. So they're like, we're fine, completely fine with leaving it in the warehouse, let it kind of suck that cost rather than chopping down our price down. And the one thing that I read about them was that they had high Black Friday deals, but their stocks dropped 20%. Right. So it's like when you're looking at something like that, but then again, Lululemon is kind of a premier product. Right. So if you're looking at, let's say a clothing retailer for like Walmart or something, they'll probably be easier to like slash down the prices. But that's what I've seen with Lululemon, and it was interesting that they
happen with that though, Ryan. What's going to happen with that, Ryan? That tells you a story, right? That they have no intentions on buying anything because their inventory is still high. They're not going to discount anything, so they're still going to pay though. It costs money to inventory that product. When you're leasing space, man, it costs a lot of freaking money.
Well, so even if you own the space, it's real estate. It still costs.
Exactly.
So if you bring in a pair of pants and it costs you $10 a month to warehouse that pair of pants, in 5 months, you better get $50 more for that pair of pants, or you've lost, or you chewed into your profit or lost money, right?
Yeah. It's all COGS, right? Cost of goods sold, and it's all built into that. So I mean, that's just one company. How many other companies did that? That's going to tell you the buying trends, though.
So if I'm permitted a shameless plug for our show next week.
King of segues.
You don't have to do a shameless plug. Just plug away.
We have Professor Jason Miller on our show next week who will answer that very question.
Good. I'm going
to. I don't think there's no one better that understands inventories in the broader macroeconomic situation. He's a genius at that stuff. So I will preempt the discussion with a few questions that we've been posing here to make sure that he's well prepared. He's prepared anyway, but next Tuesday at 10 a.m., Professor Jason Miller will be able to answer a lot of these questions, especially around.
You should figure out how we broadcast your show every week, Dean. We should figure that out. How we did it yesterday. We should do it every week.
Yeah. So can I just
tell of the tape? That will be the tail of the tape for sure. That's going to tell everybody a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think for those in the broking side, the non-asset side that are buying capacity, one of the things we've been saying to carriers is that 2023 is going to really depend on what you haul, right? So if you if you've got an exposure to single family homes, for example, which are very freight intensive on flatbeds, it's going to be a tough 2023. Right, it'll be a tough winter. If you've got a big exposure to retail freight out of Los Angeles, things are not going to be so crash hot there. If you've got exposure to farm machinery, March is going to be busy. Right, so I think it really depends on, of course, we've got the infrastructure bill. You've got a lot of gravel, sand, concrete, steel. Building. There should be a lot of building activity next year. So I think it really depends on what your customer makes and what you haul and ship that's going to determine what 2023 looks like. Because I don't think you can say, it's not like the analogy of the rising tide lifts all boats. We're still going to see a lot of variability in the market. It'll be up for some and down for others, which is exactly how we started the pandemic. Remember, we talked about some commodities are up, some are down. I think that's what next year is going to shape up like, because this bullwhip effect from this year is still, that sort of tail whip effect is still going to permeate through the markets in the first half of next year, certainly.
Yeah,
how's the auto industry?
A lot of chaos for shippers with their FMD forecast monthly demands when they're trying to project what's going to go out on a monthly basis, and they start moving their inventory. Fast movers, slow movers, getting to the front of the warehouse so they can do easy pick, easy load kind of deal. So that's going to create a lot of chaos. I can see that on the operational side.
Right.
What's happening in the auto industry, Dean?
This is probably the one subject I know absolutely nothing about. I'm a shameless truck guy. I don't know anything about cars.
Because there was a whole bunch of talk of it in the media months ago, and now it just kind of fell off the rails.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's back to normal, or because I'm still hearing people that can't get vehicles, can't get parts for vehicles, can't get anything. So
the only thing that I read, Dan, was that there's a lot of talk and chatter on nearshoring, trying to get those semiconductors and those chips and everything closer, to us, so that they can feed those lines. Because when those lines go down, man, it costs them thousands and thousands of dollars per minute. That's not a myth; it's a fact. When you have all those UAW guys that are standing around twiddling their thumbs, man, not good at all. And the bottom line is, that's why we pay so damn much money for the cars that we buy. It's all part of it.
So Dan, remember, and I'm sorry I can't answer the question. I should have been better prepared.
I would have thought you would have been prepared, but
yeah, my head's buried in truck oil all day. Yeah, I've got diesel in my veins. It's hard to get out of it. But, so one of the things we talked about is, I just pulled up the data on that Laredo to Toronto lane. Remember we talked about Auto Alley? And the data point that I found was fascinating when we looked at I think there was 60 auto manufacturers in Ontario, Ottawa area. The ratio of warehouses in Mexico was 2-1. So they're double the warehouse locations pulling parts from. And so that sort of supported why we've always thought about Laredo to Toronto or Ottawa as kind of that auto alley up through the Midwest. So remember when we got to the cross-border, the cross-border mandate protests in February?
Yes.
And truckload capacity decreased coming south, and rates hit, I'll quote including fuel, but historically rates are about $1.66 a mile on that lane, not stellar rates. They went to $3.64. So they jumped $2 a mile over historic levels. In April was the peak this year in moving not auto parts specifically, but on that alley, that lane. They're back to $1.69 this week. Wow. So it's like this massive camel hump that was all around the cross-border mandate. the market has returned to normal, is how I would say on that lane. That doesn't answer your question about what's the auto market doing, but I thought that was interesting that market has stabilized on the spot market side. I'm still told, though, that by our good friend Chuck Snow from Traffics, that those drivers that decided they weren't going to run into the US because of the mandates, that still exists. Is that something you're still hearing?
I'm not hearing very much about it. Like a lot of them, my neighbor used to, and then because of the mandates, he was like, screw it. But he just got put on Montreal, Toronto trips.
Yeah. So that's why that's exactly what I've heard. A lot more intra Canada.
I think
a lot more intra Canada, but I mean, it's not a big topic of conversation.
Right. Oh, okay.
I mean,
gotcha.
unless Ryan, I don't know if you hear it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, we hear it a lot, like, cross border, even for when we have our ops call, it's like with our sales and marketing team, it's like push intra Canada or push intra US shipments with customers, because cross border, especially, we're hearing that Wisconsin, for some reason, Wisconsin back to Ontario is a hard market to cover right now. From what they're kind of seeing. So a lot of people, we kind of knew that too, that a lot of drivers, they were just going to go to smaller fleets, like work for the Walmarts or like work for the other guys within Canada, or even work within Ontario. We find a lot of short haul guys these days, and it's if you ever need short haul in Ontario, I can go through a Rolodex, so it's we definitely seen that after effects.
I got one guy that used to do California all the time, and now he does London, Ontario, back to Mississauga all day.
Whew.
Just goes back and forth twice.
That traffic, you gotta pay me to do that. I take Cali all day.
But you know what, Ryan? He's like, I'm home every night.
Exactly.
I make the same amount of money. I don't have to deal with all the idiots in every state going down the interstate. He goes, I don't have to drive at night, and he's happy. And he's like, and I don't have to deal with customs. I don't have to deal with paperwork being wrong. I don't have to deal with any of that. And he's become friends with the guys in Mississauga and London. Loves it. Walks in, brings coffees, he's in and out in 15 minutes, and he's back on the road. And then he's just, and you got to remember, right? Drivers are used to traffic. Like my buddy, anybody I talk to that drives, they're like, no, man, I just like, it's like I mold into the seat, and I just kind of, he goes, a lot of, I've spoken to drivers who've gone from here to Florida, and they're like, I don't even remember how I got here. Like, it's just, it's like you or I driving home from work. They drive to Florida. Like, Deigan, you probably vouch
one
for
thing
that,
too that I've kind of noticed too, that we'll maybe see an influx of more drivers coming into the market, is that they're like, people drive as a third party for Amazon. So a lot of, there's no Amazon drivers who are actually delivering products. It's contracted to people. Like, I can literally go start one right now, rent a U-Haul truck and do those things. And a lot of those that I've actually had conversations with, as my wife orders every single day, that we're able to have conversations with them. They're saying like, they're looking at doing like AZ, like looking to get their license to do the big truck, because like that is the next evolution for them. So I'm interested to see if that will even be a dent at all, just to kind of see the newer drivers coming into the market, especially through Q1.
Yeah, and we do want to ask Daman a question about Calgary, right? If he's online. So did you find your answer to that, Ryan, from yesterday?
No. We just kind of so I didn't know if Daman runs reefer. So we were running completely reefer, and we'll probably have that conversation, seeing if that what he's kind of seeing on his end, because we don't do anything dry. It's all reefer from Toronto.
All reefer, but capacity is
Daman runs reefer.
Yeah,
Daman runs reefer. So Daman, the question was, if you're listening, was that it used to be, $5-6 grand to Calgary, or $5 grand to Calgary, like 6,500 to BC. And now Ryan said yesterday they were going up to what, Ryan?
85 on the 85
Calgary.
Calgary to the truck.
Yeah, and then 12,000 to BC to the truck.
To Surrey, BC, 11 to 12 is what we're talking with ops. Yeah.
So Daman, where's your thinking? We thought it was capacity related, maybe demand related. So demand has fallen away, and carriers are looking for more money to go into Calgary because there's less volume coming out. There's more deadhead. So while you're typing away madly, Ryan, you touched on something I think is fascinating. One of the things we've seen normally over the Christmas holidays, between Christmas and New Year, we typically see capacity drop by about 9 to 10%. Right, drivers take time off, and one of the things we've seen, and Nicole Glenn told me this a little while ago from Canada Expedite, because there's so many different cultures driving trucks these days. There are so many people that don't celebrate Christmas, that keep working, and they might take time off in January or around the Diwali festival in Lodi, California, in, I'm going to say, November. So there's so many different cultures driving trucks. I'm just wondering, I mean, that's something that we're starting to see, is that there's less of a need for long haul drivers to be home around key events, because those events are very different to different cultures.
Yeah, it's crazy because, like, just to add to that, like, Chinese New Year is one that affects my personal business. Is that we do lobsters from Nova Scotia to Toronto, and they get shipped to China. So none of the lobsters, they stay here, and we always kind of see that drop. But with our carriers, they always kind of give us the heads up, and we always have the conversation with them. But we'll see that because we're running like close to about 10 loads a week, moving that and going into China, and then we'll see that. Our capacity, because it's going to China and they're going to celebrate out there for Chinese New Year, it goes up, but then the drivers are kind of going down because whether they're going to India, they're going to Pakistan, or they're wherever they're going to celebrate their own 9 months of essentially working hard, working those like 70, 80 hours a week.
Yeah. We see the same in Australia with the New Zealand truckers. They'll come over from New Zealand. 2 of them will drive a truck, drive the wheels off it for 9 months, and then go home and make an absolute fortune. Yeah, they do 9 on 3 off.
Yeah, we used to when we sourced pretty much close to 1,000 containers a year to a single company, and the owners came to me one day, and this is when I first found out about it. And they're like, "Listen, we're gonna have a problem over the next couple months because we got like 20% of our drivers are going to India." And then when they get back, another 20% go, and then another, and it was, and I was actually blown away. I'm like, "What do you mean? Like they're gone for a month and a half? How could somebody leave for a month and a half? Like that's crazy. What do you mean?"
So I said, no, they're going
back home.
That's the follow-up question for Daman that we theorized about yesterday, was because we are within 2 weeks of Christmas holidays, is it that carriers are, there's less capacity available? Carriers trying to keep their trucks closer to home around Calgary, Edmonton, because of the holiday break, and therefore capacity is tightening on those lanes. There's fewer carriers wanting to load out of Ontario, out of the Edmonton, Calgary market, because they would go too far away from home and not be home for the break. That was one of the things we thought about yesterday.
Stuck in Toronto or something. Yeah.
Snowstorms and things like that. And
I mean, you got to think about it, right? There's one bridge connecting Ontario to Manitoba, right? One bridge, and that gets a backup or something happens. I mean, the delays. Well, we saw it 4 years ago now. Oh, geez, COVID just like wrapped my brain. Maybe 5 years ago when the bridge actually disconnected. They built a new bridge. And before they did anything, they pulled this bridge, they pulled the old bridge down, and then the new bridge disconnected. There was like a 3-foot gap between the bridge and the actual edge. And trucks were miles. Like I had trucks in there backed up for 4 days. Nothing you can do. Unless you go down and around and then go into Minnesota and come back up. You know what I mean? Like you can go through the international border there in Minnesota. But I mean, it was insane.
Like they did on Speed with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock.
Yeah, just let it jump it.
Just let it go.
Just put the hammer down. Easy.
That's an Aussie thing. That's an Aussie thing.
I've done it. Yeah, I've been airborne over some table trains.
You've done it going around a corner on 4 wheels.
You really went for a slide on a creeper there? You really did?
What's the creeper?
No, you didn't go for a slide on a creeper. Come on.
I've been airborne over a table drain when I fell asleep. Broke a few kingpins.
Oh, the truth comes out.
So many
so here's the thing.
Don't have that conversation with their drivers. So many lose drivers all at once. We typically have the chats about vacation times upon hiring. That's interesting.
That's a clever idea. Yeah. Lessons learned.
But Daman said it's usual for this time of year for rates to go up like that.
Right. So maybe Ryan, it's just increased demand out of Ontario to Calgary.
Yeah, and this is like our first 6 months with them anyway. So then next year we'll be able to forecast that and say and put that
on a benchmark.
Yeah, we'll be able to.
Remember yesterday our load-link spot rates had rates up on that lane 124% year over year, but that was dry van, so I don't know if it was reefer.
It'll definitely hit reefer as well. Yeah, it would definitely hit reefer as well because capacity, like we've seen, even like intermodal kind of go up too. Refrigerated intermodal has been a conversation that we start to introduce with them, putting like a high cube refrigerated container in there and just let them live load whenever they can and see it. Look at the delays will be more like, I think, what is it, trans like 5 days, but we can look to 8 days instead. but we still made the demands from there. So it's about really like what we kind of learn here with Jeff, with Dan, with you guys, just with Dean, is just thinking outside the box and finding a solution for your customers, right? Because we unfortunately had to we had to dispose of almost a couple of boxes of lemon meringue pie. Yeah,
that's bad.
Yeah, it wasn't the best, but that charity, it was too close. Well, you know what? It wasn't even expired. It was just too close for it.
Ah, right.
What do you mean too close for it? Like too close to the expiry date?
Too close to the expiry date. So the grocery chain didn't check it.
Should have come dropped it off at my house.
Yeah,
it was in Calgary. I asked for some myself.
So I had a story, a segue to another topic that I think every dispatcher, customer service person should be aware of, especially in sales, right? When you have, and it's sort of under the heading of never sugarcoat a bitter pill. And Jeff's an advocate of this, I know. We've talked about it on the show before, and that's being straight up and honest with people, especially in transportation where there's not a lot of visibility. Had an experience last week that sent my blood pressure through the roof. We have a $25,000 order of windows for our house we're renovating. And so the order date was December 5. So when the paperwork comes out and it says December 5, guess what the customer thinks?
Delivery December 5th.
Turn up on December 5. Well, no truck turns up. So we call. So we call and left several messages. By the time we get to Thursday last week, well, the truck's just arrived. It'll arrive tonight. I thought, okay. So you haven't called us, and then you're telling us the truck will arrive tonight. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, it'll be delivered tomorrow, Friday. I call Thursday night, no return. I call Friday at 3:00, angry as you couldn't believe, because we've got storms coming and no windows in this house, and we want to move in before Christmas. And they say, oh, you didn't call us to book an appointment. And I said, excuse me? No, it gets worse. This is what you never do. So first of all, you never sugarcoat a bill of pill. You get up front and say, hey, on the Friday the 3rd or 2nd, hey, we're going to be late. Our truck's late. We're just going to be late. I can plan around that because I had a $1,000 crew waiting to install the windows. So my clock's ticking so anyway, at 3:00, we have this very heated discussion with a customer service rep who says, and this is what you never say, you're not the only customer we've got. And I said, listen, dude,
you're not the only carrier we'll use.
Yeah, I said, I've been in trucking all my life. That's the last thing you say to a customer.
No way.
You be honest. Anyway, so then I get a call from someone who's going to book and they make great windows, and I'm not going to mention the company name. And the customer service rep, another one, called me back, booked the appointment. It was going to be Tuesday. And I said, hey, come on. It's Friday. Can't you deliver it tomorrow? We don't work weekends. Monday afternoon. I said, oh, anyway, Anyway, I'm almost crying. She said, okay, Monday morning, first thing. Yes, no, it's not. It's not Anderson. Not Anderson. No, they make very good windows. Anyway, so here's the story.
Take your problem to Ryan.
We go through this roller coaster ride of really bad customer service to I'm anticipating, and I go and get $100 in cash to pay the drivers, right? Because I know I'm going to have to tip them, because the lady said, well, we only take the freight to the back of the trailer door. And I think, oh, these are heavy windows. Like, this is going to be a monumental exercise. Driver turns up. We've only got 4 P&D drivers. 2 have got COVID and 1's got a hangover. And I said, this is a fascinating story. We recovered. The driver gets out. He says, hey, dude, how's it going? I said, pretty good. He said, where do you want it? And I said, well, we need it over there. I've plowed the driveway so there's no snow, so he could back his truck up the driveway. No. And it's bitterly cold, and I'm out there. This is on Monday morning this week. And he says, oh, how about I just back up to the stairs there? Couldn't have been nicer. Couldn't have been more helpful. So the whole experience was completely recovered by the driver, who said, what can I do to make this right? And him and I manhandled some really heavy windows up onto the deck and got it done. And he got himself a nice tip. But the message for anybody in sales, in transport, is never sugarcoat the bitter pill. Get ahead of it, and never, ever say you're not the only customer we've got. That was my customer service story for the week. Sorry to bore
Well,
you.
you know what? If you talk about never sugarcoat a bitter pill, you look at the best, probably the best version of that is Buckley's.
Yeah.
Right? The commercial for Buckley's. It tastes awful and it works. Because it does. Buckley's works. And it tastes like shit. But you know that going into it. And it's like, okay, so you have 1 second. I mean, it's not that I know what shit tastes like, but you guys know what I mean. But it's like
we don't.
It's
TMI, buddy. TMI.
You're on your own.
It's the best version. It's the best version of that, Dean. That a company's actually come out and said, hey, listen, garbage. Tastes like garbage. It's going to make your eyes water, but it works.
I just think it's an easier conversation to have. It's easy to have the difficult conversations up front. Like it's I learned that the hard way. It's like the checks in the mail, right? It's like you can't ship it. Like when someone says to me, oh, the truck was, an hour away. I think, oh, that means it's tomorrow. Like you just know, you kind of know the lies. And then just be upfront with people. Dan, you've said it about your customers, right? You have great partnerships, great relationships. Call them and say, hey, we have blown our assignment here. We've got, this has happened, that's happened. Because in trucking and in logistics, things break, things go wrong. It's hard to make it happen.
In every industry, Dean. We're launching a new company right now, and I can't tell you how many people don't get back to me. Where I'm chasing them, and I'm buying their product.
Yeah.
And it's like, how are you not all over this? This is a $25,000 deal. And it's like, and I'm like, hey, let's do that. And it's, I hear the Jeopardy music waiting for the people to get back to me. And it's like, what is this? This is insane. And it's like, and then you're like, okay, let's plan a call here. And then you get an email from them, hey, I have to move the call. And it's like, what do you mean you have to move the call? Like, it's crazy. And then we have a service from a company, and it's not the greatest. So I'm sending emails. I'm like recording Loom videos, and I'm sending emails, and it's crickets. No one's getting back to me. And I'm like, are you guys serious here? It's crazy what we deal with on the back end, not just trucking.
We just had a Clint Eastwood scene flash through my mind there with Jeff whistling in the background. That was like, I can't think of the movie with Clint Eastwood whistling.
The good, the bad, the ugly.
That's it. You got
I thought that's the name of your autobiography, Jeff. No? Oh, sorry. Just joking about it.
Hey, I always Santa
Loves Tracksuits is the name of his autobiography.
I'll tell you what, I've had a saying that I've used for decades. I don't fire carriers, carriers fire them.
Oh, yeah. Don't they?
Period.
Don't they have
I don't argue. I do not argue. I do not have arguments. You just set that up front. You tell them what's expected and how they're going to do it. And if they don't follow that, why did I lose the business? Excuse me.
Where do I start? I have a similar saying with hiring staff. I say to people, I don't manage staff. I hire smart people and get out of their way and let them do their job. But if I have to manage you, then it's a very quick discussion.
Very quick.
You can't manage people. Like you got to hire smart people, get out of their way.
You can't micromanage people.
Yeah.
Can't do it, man. So
fun stuff. Beautiful boys. That was lovely. Yeah, that was a great time as always on Data Day. Thank you, Dean.
Thank you.
So I'll precursor this. I'm having trouble locating the Centurion ending video. I had to delete it for yesterday's podcast because we're only allowed so many videos, and I think it's actually on my other computer. And I'm like taking all my hard drives this morning. I'm like, where is it? Where did I put it? So we will have the ending video for y'all. So I put the little ticker at the bottom. Get a hold of Daman. He's offering 60% to U.S. and Canadian agents. Get a hold of this beautiful Christmas special while it is on. And
we love Daman.
That's it.
He's the man.
Awesome. You guys love working with him.
Good guy.
People before profits.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Only way to do business.
You got it. Ryan, you going to take us out of here, Brother Bear?
Yeah, I thought you were going to take it out here, but yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming out this morning. Yesterday we had a jam-packed, full 7.5 hours we went live for, and it was amazing to see all the contributors, and we're just going to keep that going, keep that momentum going as we're kind of going into the new year and so on. So thank you, Dean, for coming out this morning, sharing amazing knowledge for your 2022 review, and then 2023 reflection on what we're going to be looking at to come up. So hit the replay again, 3 p.m. Instagram, sorry, not Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Facebook as well. And am I missing one? LinkedIn. There we go. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. We got an amazing guest for you guys tomorrow. We'll send some more information today at noon for it. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Bye.